Oi, oi, it's your boy, Slacky J, Fights Gone By podcast, coming at you on Thursday the 8th of October, and we're talking about Marlon Moraes versus Cory Sandhagen and the fight night that is attached to that. And if I seem like I'm pressing on to get into the action, it's because I've been trying to write something and Fight Pass has just been shit for like the last several days. You search for Aldo versus Moraes, and it's on the second page of results. But Fight Pass just generally is terrible. And the other thing about Fight Pass at the moment is that you'll get the page up, and then you'll try and scroll the scrolling bar won't work. You can't actually change time in the video. So yeah, stopped writing that. Now I'm just going to talk about it instead, and we'll write something more interesting, probably over the weekend. But yes, this fight seems to be being a bit slept on. Cory Sandhagen I always knew was very slept on because he's my lowest watched Filthy Casuals guide of the modern era, by which I mean since I learned to video edit passably. And yeah, I re-uploaded him, and again he got like no views. So yeah, people won't even watch him if they're subscribed to me. But yeah, very good fighter, very underappreciated fighter. And Marlon Moraes, I thought was on like the cusp of stardom, but I don't think too many people know or care about him either, which is very strange. Certainly didn't help that he had that win over Aldo that wasn't really a win. And then when they announced the decision, he went absolutely batshit, like running around the cage like he just got a gold medal at the Olympics. And most people thought that he got incredibly lucky to be given that decision, and the UFC agreed so much that they gave Aldo the next title fight instead of Moraes. So you got this weird situation. The way I was describing it when I was writing the intro to this article was that, the bantamweight division, you get no breaks, all your fights are against killers, and you probably won't even gain that much if you win. Because, Cory Sandhagen beat John Lineker, very scary guy, Rafael Assunção, guy nobody wants to fight, then jumped into that fight with Aljamain Sterling, lost, and now no easy fights. He's taking on an even more respected opponent in Moraes. So on paper, fun fight. Well, certainly lots of ability going into the cage. Now, Moraes is an interesting chap because he was in World Series of Fighting and he wasn't fighting like the best of the best, but when he came to the UFC, his fights slowed down a little bit. He had Assunção scraped a decision over him in his first fight, and then he fought John Dodson, got awarded a split decision in that one, but it was sort of a step down from like this knockout artist everyone was expecting. And then suddenly he just knocked out three dudes back to back, Aljamain Sterling, Jimmy Rivera, and then the rematch with Rafael Assunção. Actually, that wasn't a knockout, that was a knockdown, and then a guillotine sometime after. But, three finishes back to back after looking like the finishes had just dried up with the level of competition that he was now fighting. But really makes his money with his kicks. Obviously, you're not going to make people quit in the UFC with low kicks like he did in World Series of Fighting, but still very, very useful. What I was really impressed by rewatching some of these fights against good opponents is his ability to cover distance with his kicks. Henry Cejudo, came out in the karate stance and was going to try and be right on the end of his reach. And he'd obviously been practicing to deal with the low kick because he'd just fought Demetrius Johnson like 2 fights earlier and had trouble with the low kick. And now he's fighting a guy who's known for low kicking. So he came out like ready to slide back and let it fall short. And Moraes would hip fake with his right hip and skip up, back foot underneath him, push off it, into another low kick. You'll see Israel Adesanya do it a lot. Loma Lookboonmee did it last week. But that hip fake to get your right foot underneath you and skip forward, that's really useful to cover ground. And he covered tons of ground against Henry Cejudo like that. He was doing a similar thing, doing his left kicks as well. And he was stepping through into like running wheel kicks at several points. And of course, you can't underestimate the speed because it seems like everyone does. Jimmy Rivera got caught with the switch kick to the head. I mean, technically, Aljamain Sterling got caught with the switch kick to the head. He was just ducking into it and ate the knee, like happened to Luis Azeredo versus Joachim Hansen. But the one against Rivera was dead to rights. Just caught him behind the guard, behind on the open side where your arm is the only thing that's protecting you. You can't duck down behind your shoulder. And he got clipped over the head like that. Then 2 fights later, fights Aldo, does exactly the same thing to him right out of the gate. And, Aldo's not only a very fast dude with very quick reactions, but he's also a dude who keeps his guard very high. He's a very defensively sound fighter, and he still got caught right off the bat. And one of the things that impresses me about Moraes' switch kick other than the speed is, again, the ground he covers. He'll switch like the speed is like he's doing one just underneath him, which you'll see like a lot of Nakamura do. They do like a little switch where both their feet sort of meet in the middle, and then they'll do the kick, which is just a way to get there faster. But Moraes switches so that his right foot is basically forward of his left foot, of where his left foot was in his stance, so he's making distance. Fiziev, is a great example of that, but obviously very high-class Muay Thai fighter there. But switch kicking and making distance and doing it quick is, really unfamiliar to a lot of MMA fighters. Meanwhile, Cory Sandhagen's sort of known for his kicks in his own right, mainly low kicks, more of like a combinations into low kicks sort of style. That, if you saw it in the kickboxing, you'd go, oh, that classic Dutch kickboxing combination body shot low kick. And he does that very well, and he leads with the jab wonderfully too, which isn't so much a Dutch kickboxing thing. And he switches stances a lot too. There's a little bit of TJ Dillashaw in there because I think they were training partners at one point. Oh, just had to break the recording because I almost choked to death on my tea. Let's see if I can plough ahead anyway. I think what's quite interesting in this one is that Marlon Moraes has a very clear difficulty with being put under pressure and being made to work, which wasn't an issue, didn't seem to come up, because he had a more sort of measured pair of fights with Asuncao and Dodson, and then he was more the aggressor in the more recent three. But once Henry Cejudo... The Cejudo fight is so fucking good, by the way. If you've not seen it, or you haven't seen it in a while, because I hadn't seen it... I don't think I'd watched it since the first time it happened. Actually, no, I've done some things on Henry Cejudo since then, so I must have. But that fight is so good, because he's beating the shit out of Henry Cejudo in the first round, and Henry Cejudo basically just goes, okay, I'm going to get in his face now, squares up his stance more, doesn't do the karate stuff anymore. I think he might have hurt his left hand because he doesn't throw like a single good left hand after that point. He just throws right hand leads. And this is something that actually comes up in the Aldo fight too. Surprising how much of a sucker Moraes is for the straight right. His head is just sort of always there. And then in trying to overcompensate for it against both Cejudo and Aldo. And Aldo was flashing the jab first, but Cejudo was just throwing them naked. But trying to compensate for them, he was like ducking down and giving Henry Cejudo the double collar tie. And then you'll remember Henry Cejudo just kneed his face off. But it was both of those guys. It was pressure and pace that tired Moraes out. And against Aldo, you really saw it in a more measured way because Aldo. Well, I mean, you're always going to see that from Aldo, but Aldo put the pressure on, walked him down, was fighting very technically, wasn't slamming in the right hands as readily as Cejudo was, like it was a life and death fight. But every time Moraes did anything, he'd take he used to be a teammate of Edson Barboza, and you can see it because he skips halfway around the cage after every engagement, and he was exhausting himself with all this movement, in addition to being hit. And Aldo got to the body a couple of times too, which was a good idea, and we're going to talk about that, being an idea for Sandhagen. But mainly, it was making Moraes work a lot, because he's got a little bit of Aldo's problem, where if you put the pressure on him, he's going to come back with counters, or counter combinations even, as hard as he can, and that's how he's going to keep you off him. Problem with that is that if you can make them do that over and over again, you can get them to wear themselves out much more effectively. Think of someone like Yoel Romero, where even if you put the pressure on him, very hard to get him to work at any pace other than his own. Whereas like Max Holloway versus Jose Aldo, both fights, comes out, gets in Aldo's face. He's just flicking him with the jab for the most part, or feinting, but he's making Aldo throw a lot back because that's Aldo's way of getting you to back off. And it worked for, almost everyone, or on almost everyone rather. And Moraes has a little bit of that. You can see that in the Cejudo fight. Cejudo comes in with a punch in the first round. Marlon Moraes throws back like a 4-punch combination, just trying to take his head off with every punch. You can see that in the Asuncao fight where he catches him with a good counter and then just starts swinging. But it's very intense. It's a lot of effort that he goes to in counter swinging, and I think that's something that could be interesting in this fight because I've seen Cory Sandhagen put the pressure on people really well. If you watch his fights against the couple of overmatched lads he fought in the UFC, he's just all over them. And against Asuncao, actually, which is a very hard fighter to put pressure on consistently. The problem is that Aldo is a big hitter, Cejudo is a very respectable hitter, and they were just going hell for leather trying to hit Moraes in the head as hard as they could. I'm One of my concerns in this one is Sandhagen relies a lot on the jab and probing and flicking the jab and feinting the jab, and against a lot of people that draw overreactions and stuff. But I'm just concerned if he doesn't put the right straight down the pipe stiff and early and often, he might not get the responses he wants from Moraes. He might not get Moraes working as hard as he can to, you know, stay off the cage, circle the ring, throw punches at air, trying to keep him off him. I'm wondering how much you can actually get Moraes to overcommit just by flicking out jabs and things like Sandhagen did against Lineker. But in keeping with that theme, like get into the body on Moraes, great idea. Obviously, ripped dude, got a massive six-pack, but very big for the weight class, or at least every time he gets in the ring, everyone goes, oh my god, how does this guy make the weight? Certainly the videos of him talking most recently, he looked like absolute trash, you know, doing his weight cut. But yeah, cuts a lot of weight to make 135, and hitting the body anyway. Great way to just get people tired and take advantage of conditioning shortcomings. Which is great because Cory Sandhagen has a wicked left hook to the body. Of course, one of the big concerns in this fight is that Cory Sandhagen likes to keep his hands fairly low until he's entered striking range, or rather punching range. And Moraes can cover that ground so quickly. The switch kick is a constant threat. And also, Sandhagen stands quite long, bounces in with his jab and then bounces back. Low kicks coming out of that could be a nightmare for him. And while Moraes is a swing and hope sort of counterpuncher, and he can sort of overreact, like the crouching down and giving up the double collar tie against Henry Cejudo, he's still a fantastic hitter. So, you know, it's there's a lot to worry about there for Sandhagen. I think using front kicks could be a real use to him because he's got such a long frame for the weight class. And if you watch that Aldo fight back, Aldo was using a lead leg push kick just to jam Moraes as he came off the fence. He did it a few times through the rounds, but he didn't do it that much, but I thought it was a nice idea. He did it more than he kicked the leg, and he's famous for that, so, you know. But yeah, front kicks, good way to not only jam Moraes, but also take some of the wind out of his sails. And then the other one was oblique kicks. If you notice Moraes, as I said, he makes big ground on his kicks. Like, he really does chase guys back a lot of the time. And also the other thing that he does is like he'll do a dipping jab or a dipping double jab. And both of those he really needs to put his lead leg in to do. There was an example in the second Assunção fight where he tried to step in with, I can't remember what it was, probably a jab or a double jab or something like that. But Assunção just put in a short jamming oblique kick to the front of the knee, and he stumbled all over the place. Doesn't matter if it's an oblique kick or a low line side kick, but jamming kicks, you know, things that stop a guy as he's just coming in to explode. Does that sound gay? As he's stepping in. You know, Holly Holm used them well against Ronda Rousey. John Jones used them against Vitor Belfort. People who want to get in, and they have to get their feet in to get their hands in, or to stand on one leg and kick you in the head. And you just keep jamming it. Just straighten their leg a little bit. And a lot of the time what happens is that it'll force their hips back. They do like a weird butt back movement. And then they have to re-establish their position, and you're already long gone. It'd be interesting to see how much Sandhagen can use his wrestling as a threat in this fight too, because part of why Cejudo was able to use double collar tie, and I would love to see Sandhagen use the double collar tie in this one, because if you think about those two weapons, like the right straight down the pipe and the double collar tie, he's longer and taller than Henry Cejudo, so he's better set up to use those two weapons. But there might have been a degree of Marlon Moraes throwing his hips back to try and keep away from proper clinches against Cejudo, who absolutely rocks with that inside trip from the clinch, from the over-under that is, and did hit a nice snap down into an anaconda attempt in that fight. But if Sandhagen can establish some kind of wrestling threat, you know, he can start snatching up the head when he enters. And it was very concerning how often Moraes was dropping his head into that double collar tie and didn't really seem to have any ideas for getting out of it. He wasn't hipping in, he wasn't trying to tear himself away, he was just sort of like cross-arm guarding and getting kneed in the face. But again, tiredness probably played a factor in that one. But there wasn't. The first round went amazing for him, and then he was just taking right straights in the face out of nowhere. You know, it wasn't like he got tired and then the right straight started landing. But yeah, this is a really good fight. I mean, you probably have to favour Marlon Moraes just because of his record against really good guys. And a lot of the factors in the striking, like the way that Cory relies on his jab and the length of his stance, and the fact that I haven't seen an awful lot of stiff hitting out of him against really good guys. That probably leads you to side with Moraes. But yeah, I could see as this is a 5-rounder, if Sandhagen can keep it going, he could definitely tire Moraes out. Because Moraes is just an all or nothing, like everything with power sort of fighter. So let's have a quick look at what else is on this card. Edson Barbosa versus Makwan Al-Makani. That's a bit of an odd one. Because originally, I believe it was Edson Barbosa versus boy of the podcast, Sadiq Youssef, which is a really fun fight because you've got two really interesting strikers meeting up there. Whereas now you've got Edson Barbosa versus almost one-dimensional grappler. I suppose that's fun because Dan Ige was supposed to be a grappler versus the striker, and he fought the worst game plan possible against Barbosa, and still won somehow on the cards. But if you remember that Ige fight, like Ige kept running at him on straight lines, pumping hands, and then shooting out the side door. And you're like, no, Edson Barbosa has problems backing onto the fence, and when things start to pile up in combination, why are you trying to sharpshoot or outpoint the fastest guy at lightweight? It's very well saying that, but he did win the decision. Most people think that he shouldn't have, but that's like the front door being open and you being like, no, I'm going to climb through the window because I want to. It's just there is a very obvious flaw in Edson Barbosa, which has existed for ages, and he hasn't changed. And Dan Ige managed to fight all around it without ever actually confronting it. But then Makwan Al-Makani's game plan is usually to run straight at the dude and try and take him down. Hopefully runs him onto the fence, and then we see if Makwan Al-Makani can go beyond one round. He's on that Straight Blast Gym Island treadmill protocol with Conor McGregor and Johnny Walker. Mind you, I could see Edson Barbosa hitting that nice slip to left hook to the body and pivot, or back kick to the body as the guy comes in, and everyone being like, well, clearly backing onto the fence is not a problem anymore. Odd fight. Don't really need to get into it too much. Like, basically, pure 1-round grappler versus 3-round striker. But otherwise, there's some interesting stuff on this card. Like, not amazing matchups is what I'd say, but there's certainly some stuff to keep your eye on. You got Ben Rothwell versus Marcin Tybura just being the standard heavyweight fight. How can I hype that up to you? Marcin Tybura is an incredibly boring heavyweight fighter. Ben Rothwell is sometimes fun. But then you got Marcus Perez versus Dricus du Plessis. Marcus Perez is always kind of a weird, interesting guy. He's sort of like a Michel Pereira, but without all the fun stuff. But he's kind of fun. And then Dricus du Plessis is a South African lad, but he was KSW's welterweight champion for a little while. He traded a pair of knockouts with Roberto Soldic. If you've not seen the Filthy Casuals Guide to Roberto Soldic, go check that out. 2 cracking fights with Soldic. They each knocked each other out. Didn't complete the trilogy, which is kind of weird. He just sort of moved on. He took another fight in KSW after that, won by knockout against Joltan Santos. But a very competent man and a very good finisher, and well worth your time to watch. Then you got Tom Aspinall, the big English heavyweight who scored that great knockout over that fat lad, and he's fighting Alan Badeau, who is, I believe, a light heavyweight for the most part, but he's, just making his UFC debut. You got Tom Breeze coming back. The hype was very much on Tom Breeze for a little while. He suffered a loss, he got some injuries, went away for a bit, but now he's back. It could be the case of like Ankalaev or someone like that, where he still has potential, but people just don't look at him anymore. He's interesting as a prospect. And then Youssef Zalal, who's the Moroccan lad who does crazy shit, amazing flying knee knockout on his record. But his last fight, when was that? That was the Overeem. Wait, no, it was Olenek's last fight, whoever that was. He stole the show then. Fantastic fighter. Or certainly entertaining fighter. But that's your lot for this card. There's a Bellator card this weekend, which is being shown on BBC iPlayer, which they're touting as an amazing thing. But like, you could film some comedy skits in your bedroom, and it could get commissioned for iPlayer. It does mean that Bellator is stealing some of my license fee, though. Not keen on that. That's Czech Congo versus Tim Johnson. Tim Johnson obviously just coming off headbutting Matt Mitrione into a knockout, but on like a bit of a career resurgence. And Czech Congo also on a career resurgence. It seems like not fighting good guys makes you on a career resurgence. But yeah, that's the Bellator heavyweight division. And then MVP's fighting Ross Houston, which is actually a pretty good fight because MVP obviously at a good level, but not fighting good people for the most part. Ross Houston at a decent level. Yeah, he had that great fight with Nicholas Dalby in Cage Warriors, which I'm always talking about, the one where they had to call it off due to both bleeding so much. But yeah, former Cage Warriors champion. Would be interesting to see if he can do anything against MVP, who's very difficult to get a hold of. Unless he smells special brew on your breath, and then he'll knock you out. Oh, and then I missed off on the UFC card. I was going to talk about Giga Chikadze. And he's quite an interesting chap to me, because he had a decent kickboxing career in Glory, was sort of pursuing the two rabbits at once sort of thing, had a lot of trouble with the wrestling and MMA, went to Dana White's Contender Series, lost his fight there against Austin Springer. And I was writing something about this, but I might as well just say it on the podcast now. But Chikadze's problems are that he fought a very overwhelming sort of style in kickboxing, and it gave him these chances to fight orthodox, throw combinations, switch to southpaw mid-combination, and then score the body kick on the open side, and which he calls the Giga kick, but yeah, it's just a body kick. But and that was really successful for him. The problem, like, it could work one or two ways. So he'd throw like a combination or a jumping knee or something from orthodox, step forward into southpaw, and then body kick, or he'd throw a combination, step back, and as the opponent stepped onto him, to contract the space that he's expanded, he'd kick him in the body then. Problem is that in MMA, he's not able to open up with his hands or his combinations like that, especially from orthodox. So in the Austin Springer fight, he tried to fight southpaw for most of it, and he doesn't have a very good left straight, so he doesn't really have a southpaw double attack. So what happened was that Austin Springer was just looking down the barrel of his left body kick at all times. So whenever Chikadze did kick, he'd just run him over and take him down. Standing southpaw for kickboxers can be a pretty good idea, because if you've got the southpaw double attack, you can work in sharpshooting. You raise the stakes on your body and head kick, because on the closed side you're going to be kicking into the leg mostly. And also you extend the distance slightly because your lead knees will get in the way of each other, and you can feed the single more comfortably than you could from an orthodox stance. From an orthodox stance, it's if you're both orthodox or you're both southpaw, it's a lot easier for them to just drop on your hips with a level change. Whereas if you're open guard, you can feed the single more successfully. But since then, he went away, came back, got into the UFC, had some fights with Brandon Davis and Jamal something or other. But he was switching stances in those fights, but he still can't open up with the kind of volume that he needs to hide the kick. So he's just sort of working in ones and twos. He's got a decent jab, but both those guys were able to take him down. When he threw the two, they just dropped on his hips. And he's not good enough he's okay at standing up, and he's okay at shaking off a takedown attempt, but not good enough that he can separate with good time. Because you've got to remember, like, every time you open up, if the guy drops on your hips or gets a clinch, you lose a minute for every time that you open up with strikes. And then his most recent one was against a bantamweight who was like a foot shorter than him, and he was successful in that fight, and he did tons of showboating. But you were very aware that it was a small bantamweight on short notice. So he's kind of an enigma, the old Giga Chikadze. Really, for him to have success, he either needs to change his style, find the confidence in stopping takedowns, getting up, and breaking from the clinch within good time, to be able to use his old style, or develop a new style, which I might have just said, with like a lower output and rely on feints more. He's not very good at feinting. Or try and meet somewhere in the middle. But he needs to find something, because he's got a jab, and then he can't really open up with anything else. Anyway, I was looking at this card and going, there's not an awful lot to talk about, so we're going to do a couple of Q&A questions from the Twitter and the Facebook. Best starter Pokemon, Squirtle. MMA Army says, do you play any MMA computer games? No. I played UFC Undisputed, but no, not Undisputed, whatever it is. Yeah, UFC, but it's crap. Who, if anyone, has McFad says, who, if anyone, has had consistent success utilizing the De La Riva and reverse De La Riva in MMA? It seems to me it leaves one far too open to strikes to really be effective. Gegard Musasi, good guy from the regional scene, has good success from the De La Riva. Anthony Pettis, Sergio Pettis. I feel like the De La Riva works as a means to keep the guy attached to you as he stands up. And that puts you in position to kick him in the head. And it also like slows him down running around your guard or just throwing your legs by. But I think, using the De La Riva is just a point of attachment. I don't think you're going to get an awful lot going from there. You have to sit up on the single. You have to pummel and sit up for like a shin-to-shin entry on something. You'll see the odd tripod sweep from there, like Big Nog caught Barnett with it. Both the Pettises hit tripod sweeps quite regularly. But the tripod sweep pairs well with up kicks. It's sort of a limited position. I mean, it beats being stacked up in open guard with the guy raining down punches on you and his hips pressed in so that you can't like double ankle reap or whatever. It's a better position when the opponent's standing in your guard than just having the opponent standing in your guard. Reverse De La Riva in MMA. Reverse De La Riva really is more of a countermeasure to knee cut passing, and there aren't an awful lot of good knee cut passes in MMA. Habib's good at it, but generally, like, you don't get stuck there. In jiu-jitsu, you get stuck there a lot. Like, that's the battle a lot of the time. One guy trying to pass, the other guy trying to sweep, and you're just sort of stuck in that middle ground. Nicholas says, how do you think a fight between Yan and TJ goes? God, I forgot that even could happen. If TJ comes back in anything like good condition and is able to work his style without EPO, I think that's a fantastic matchup, because you've got a guy who does his best work floating around and darting in and out. Because you've got to remember, like, darting in and out to the side works best when the opponent's coming to you. It doesn't work so well if you're going to the opponent, because every time they move back, it lessens the angle that you're trying to take anyway. You can only really go in and go out the side door if they're there for it, you know? Which is why TJ looked so bad against Dominic Cruz until he took a step back and had some success and then started chasing again. But yeah, I mean, all-out aggression from Yan. You've got a great pressure fighter there versus a great MMA outfighter with some pop on his punches too. John says, who's the smallest fighter who could have success at heavyweight without bulking, considering the skill disparity? Lee Priest. Yeah, he could bulk. Oh, no, you said without bulking. No, hang on. Probably someone middleweight or light heavyweight. Probably someone who's already doing a horrible cut. But then, this is the thing, like, I wouldn't have thought much about Thiago Santos being, you know, he was always doing that huge cut, but I never really thought much about it because he was just sort of like a background character in the division. Rumble a bit more because he was having those awful, like, collapses at weigh-ins and shit. But there are lots of guys who are cutting huge amounts of weight to get down, like, two divisions below what they could be comfortably fighting at. So that's always interesting. And then you consider people like Rashad Evans had success at heavyweight before he eventually decided, like, he could get all the way down to middleweight at one point, way too late in his career. But I don't know. Whenever I think of someone like Dominic Reyes, I just think of the trouble Ovinson Prue had against Ben Rothwell. You know, it was clearly very different. He'd been the size bully. I hate that term. People are always like, John Jones is a size bully. But Ovinson Prue had been the size bully at light heavyweight, and suddenly against a real heavyweight, he was just running for his life. How do you see a Chito Vera versus Merab matchup going, says Aaron. That's an interesting one. I don't have a whole lot of confidence in Chito's takedown defense and ability to stand up. What Chito does really well is he works well from overhooks. So the guy will go in on his waist, and I've seen him stop dudes in their tracks and like step over to mount. And I've also seen him use the overhooks to like pursue an omoplata and come up on top, which I suppose is a good idea. If you're already dealing with a wrestling disadvantage against someone like Merab, best to take advantage and start grappling on the way down. He gets stuck on bottom and he just throws up triangles a lot of the time, and I don't think that's a great idea against Merab. Ollie says, would Sakuraba have beaten Hickson? Yeah. Hickson never fought anyone good except washed up Funaki. Most important kick for a boxer to learn going into MMA? Oh, calf kick, obviously, because it's the thing that's ruining the meta at the moment, or ruling the meta. And also, like, if you learn it, hopefully you'll recognize why it's such an issue and learn to box without putting your foot in the way for it. Other than that, maybe a front kick off the lead leg, just so that when you raise your lead leg like that, you can hop in, and that'll mitigate the effect of being calf kicked, or make it harder to be calf kicked on the way in, at least. Thank you, Sadman, who said he doesn't have a question, but he has just signed up to the Patreon and done 3 all-nighters in a row on my history episodes. Shangtera says, how long until a men's Chinese champ, and at what weight class? I'd imagine in bantamweight to sort of middleweight territory, just because that's where I'd expect Japanese fighters to excel too. Typically, if you see heavyweights in Japan, they tend to just be like local attractions because they're Japanese heavyweights. I mean, Satoshi Ishii was a Japanese heavyweight, but he probably could have made the cut to light heavyweight. Did he at some point? I feel like he did. I think, lower weight classes probably. I don't actually know much about the Chinese MMA scene. You see a lot of Mongolian guys coming through now, which is exciting because they have such strong wrestlers. You know, sumo is dominated by Mongolian wrestlers who just learned to wrestle in the nappy. One has an awful lot of Chinese fighters on their roster. I don't know if it's at that point in China yet. I think you got Yan Jianan and who's that last? The last in one who fought Angela Lee twice. There's good women's fighters out there in China. I just remember when that guy was doing all the stuff exposing Kung Fu masters, there was a lot of talk about how like it isn't really a career path yet. There's a lot of good Chinese kickboxers. You know, China's huge on kickboxing now. Not even Sanshao or Sanda. They just love kickboxing. They keep putting on like Kunlun and things like that. So I think there's a lot of people who could cross over. I just don't know if it's caught on there yet. And there's probably, I mean, I know nothing about the Chinese regional scene, so like there could be some guys coming up. But I do remember that Tough China was bad. Kyrie says, what makes Wonder Boy's karate effective compared to others people's? There's always like two real types of karate that you're talking about. There's like contact, like knockdown karate, which is the one that teaches you to be tough, and then there's point karate, which is the one that teaches you to be elusive. And Wonder Boy did more of the elusive stuff and then moved into American kickboxing. Really what makes Wonder Boy effective in MMA is his movement and ring craft, which is something that, you know, wouldn't... Everything else is just straight hitting and a couple of nice kicks that turn over at the end. Distancing and ring craft are what make Wonder Boy different. He could call it boxing if he wanted to. Like, it is literally just where his feet are, where he is in the ring, and how he creates space and removes space. Would it be a good move for Yoel Romero to go up to light heavyweight? Maybe. There's so little talent there. I think we're just at a weird point where Yoel Romero isn't really going to do anything. He's always going to be a freak athlete, but he's just sort of like taking time off in these fights now. What are your thoughts on black pudding? Lush. And blue cheese? Lush. What about the two together? I have never tried it, but I will. Do you think a format like Quintet could work for judo in the Olympics? I think Quintet is a fucking great format. Hail Kazushi Sakuraba for inventing the one exciting team grappling type or game, because Polaris Squads was on this weekend and I was desperate to give it a try, and my girl Fionn Davis, she had a great match on there, but that was a super fight. But the teams, there were 18 matches on the whole card, including the super fight, and there were 2 submissions. I mean, oh yeah, hard. What happened to Kung Lee? I don't know. Is he okay? I mean, he fell out with the UFC and they stopped using him as like the face of the UFC in China. Also, Tough China was bad. They just sort of gave up on China. How do you feel about combat karate or karate combat? Oh, it's bollocks, mate. I love what they're trying with all that. They're leaning into it really hard and they're trying to capitalize on like the Cobra Kai connection, but the fights are still so bad. Best shithouser in MMA, kickboxing, Muay Thai? Don't know. Best quote from the Mortal Kombat movies? I studied all your moves, baby. Best looking shorts in combat sports? Might be Mayweather. I mean, he used to come out in like red leather shorts and things. Genki Sudo had nice shorts. If you change him every time, that's dope. Wiki Akio used to design his own shorts because he was an artist and a textile worker, apparently. So, yeah, there's some cool ones out there. They just... yeah, we got Venom coming up soon, and I looked at Venom's storefront the other day and I went, fucking hell. Oh, needs more snake skulls. And last question from that guy, Emil. How are you just in general? Yeah, I'm alright. I'm bored to shit of COVID, but who isn't? What would be your walkout song? Oh, Tub Thumping by Chumbawamba. Okay, this is the last one I'm going to do today, but could Darren Till actually provide anything of value to the Mike Perry corner, aside from the memes? There's a couple of questions about this. And yeah, if you missed it, Mike Perry is auctioning off his corner spot, which I think is hilarious. I mean, fuck the UFC for not letting people have sponsorships and so on. Yeah, if you're an independent contractor, you should independently be able to choose your corner. So he's auctioning off the spot. Obviously, lots of fans tried to get it. I thought someone on Reddit got it originally, but now Darren Till is threatening to get it. And obviously Darren Till and Mike Perry have this weird back and forth bromance / nemesis relationship. But yeah, there was a lot of talk about like what would Darren Till do in the corner? Would he throw the towel in as a gag, or would he actually provide some insight? And Dan Hardy was on the side that he'd probably just do the job properly. But I feel like Darren Till recognizes that there is some talent in Mike Perry, and Mike Perry is, he's succeeding mainly because he's a meme, but he could be succeeding more if he actually used what he's got. Like, if you watch the Ellenberger fight, obviously Ellenberger was on a bit of a slump by that point, but he's using step-up left kicks and those elbows on the break and stuff. He's doing quite technical stuff for Mike Perry. And then other fights, like the Alex Oliveira one, he just looks like shit. I think, honestly, he's not... If he just did what coaches told him and they were telling him to do the right thing, I think he'd be great. I think he's got the athleticism to do stuff. And clearly he can do cool step-up kicks to the head and lead leg and stuff. It's just that he doesn't do it by his own will. He has to be told to do it or have it on a whim. I think that would be the best face turn if Darren Till gives him some advice to win the fight and then they hug it out afterwards. But yeah, like the whole Mike Perry thing, I've said it before, is not going to end well. The man is losing it, and everyone else is just sort of cheering it on. Anyway, on that somber note, I'll get out of here for today. We'll be back Monday to talk about all the fights that happened over the weekend. I'll probably write something fun over the weekend. So if you want to support the podcast and read the things that I write and watch the film rooms and all that stuff, sign up to the Patreon. If you want to send an email to the podcast, fightsgonbypodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to see what I'm writing anytime, fightprimer.com. I'm your boy Jack Slack, MVP not fighting the bin man. Bless.